I microwaved a cell phone a few days ago. It was a stupid, juvenile decision. I'm sure if you asked me at the time, I would have said something about wanting to see if it would explode. In my defense, I accidentally broke it a few months ago and had smoked a lot of weed during the early hours of the day. Truth is, I was bored. Incredibly so. I don't have many friends, and I live alone in a grimy apartment in the middle of a dingy city. I have very few hobbies, chiefly getting high and wasting time. I hadn't seen another person in over a week. I hadn't even talked to my parents in months. Hadn't had a relationship in a year. I work 10 hours a day at home, and I don't know hardly anyone in this town. I figured the best way to combat this feeling of isolation was to look inward and appreciate myself more, but in doing so, it honestly felt like I've been pushing the people closest to me away. The only social interaction I get anymore is the voice call I get from my supervisor halfway across the country. This was the life I wanted. That's what I kept telling myself, even if some days I would remember that it wasn't. And on those days, I told myself this was a matter of survival. For those that are curious about the phone, it didn't explode, create sparks, or do anything cool. Rather, it spinned around in a circle, filled the room with the smell of burning plastic, and died after a few minutes in the heat. When I pulled it out, it was inoperable. It wouldn't start. The screen was black and unresponsive. It was a smoldering paperweight that no longer had life. I chucked it on the kitchen counter and prepared to go about my busy day of binging some movies while working on my company's project, alone, and in the light of a single fluorescent bulb that illuminated my dark apartment. So I got to work, and I started pounding away at the keyboard. Only, this was interrupted when after a few minutes, the dead phone rang. My phone with the fried electronics, and the missing SIM card, and the busted battery, and the cracked screen, rang. I approached it carefully. At the time, I found this to be bizarre. When I held it in my hand, it was still warm from the microwave. The screen was pitch black, which meant I couldn't see who it was. Not that it didn't matter. Even if I hadn't subjected it to heat death, it shouldn't even be able to connect a call. Either way, there was only one way to find out what was going on. I held it in my hand, the phone vibrating slowly, and brought it to my ear. The ringing stopped. There was nothing on the other side, and I could only hear the sound of my shallow breath. I clenched my palms, unsure of what to expect. Part of me assumed that there was an explanation, perhaps this was a hardware malfunction from the fried microchip. Yet after a minute of staying silent and hearing nothing, I finally spoke. "Hello?" I muttered. A faint gasp came from the speaker. Through the oppressive silence, just past the slight hum of the background signal, I could hear light sobbing. My heart sank as a quiet voice began to speak. Is there someone there?" I scratched my head, clutching the phone tightly. "Ugh, yeah," I said. "Who is this?" After a brief spout of sobbing, she spoke more clearly. "I can hear you." She sounded young, like late teens. Her words were interspersed with tears and soft wailing. To be honest, the hairs on the back of my neck were starting to stand straight, and I began to notice just how cold the room was. I repeated the question. "Who is this?" "Jason, it's me. Samantha. You remember me, right?" Her voice was soft, low and barely audible. It was almost static with a slight hum behind it. She spoke abnormally slow and almost as if the words came difficult to her. There was, however, something else entirely concerning. "My name's not Jason. And I don't know anyone named Samantha." She erupted back into a faint sob before giving me her full name. Then, she said something I was not expecting. "Please don't go." I started to think more clearly about what was happening at this time. I was beginning to consider that perhaps the heat damaged the receiver. Maybe I was picking up a call in the ether. Maybe this was just a wild coincidence going on with the faulty electronics, and this was the last hurrah of my decade-old phone. I was convincing myself that there was an explanation. Not wanting to waste more time either way, I said what I had to say. "I don't know you, and you should hang up. I think you have the wrong number." "Wait," she yelled, her voice shaking, and almost indistinguishable from a blood-curdling scream. The phone erupted into static, and as it mellowed back down, I could hear her pleading. "Don't leave me. Please don't, stay, please stay, please. At this point, now a new thought was starting to enter my head. Despite the perplexity of the situation, the person on the other side sounded like she needed help. Are you hurt? What's wrong? More sobbing, before she spoke. I think I've been in a car accident. Wait, hold on. I moved hastily to my laptop in the living room, clutching the phone to the side of my head as I moved. To be honest, I was unsure if this person was even in the same state as me, but I was at least going to make an effort to help if I could. Where are you? I'll call an ambulance for you. I don't remember. I'll look you up. Stay there. I typed her name into the search bar. She kept sobbing as I pressed enter. This was not what I had imagined I'd be doing this morning, but damn it, I was certainly intrigued. But most importantly, if I could help someone who needed it, it would make my week. This optimism quickly died as I put her name in the search bar and pressed enter. My hands turned cold, my bones stiffened, and my eyes sprung open. The search results were quickly conclusive. There was a link to a news article, a funeral home, an obituary, car accident, gravicide. The name she gave me belonged to a dead woman. Whoever you are, hang up now. Don't contact me again. The breathing on the other side intensified, and the hair on my neck stood up as I could feel my skin turn pale. As I began to think about it further, the situation had begun to return to absurdity. Here I was in my living room, talking on a broken phone that was sent through the microwave, and the only person I've talked to all week was this scared woman on the other side, that was either pulling a lazy prank, or had some other problems. Wait, please, she said much more weakly this time. I don't want you to go. I pulled the phone away from me, the screen still blank. I held down on the power button, nothing. The phone was not turning off. My heart was throbbing, and my fingers were quivering as I barely held the electronic in my hand. Wait, I'll come to you. I'll follow your voice. I shook my head. No, don't do that, I said, my words stammering out. I pulled the phone from my ear, dropping it onto the floor and stepping towards the furthest wall from it. My heart was pounding, but I was still convincing myself that what I had experienced was technical failure. It was technical failure. Surely it was a technical failure. The voice on the other side died down, and the room returned to silence. Then, the phone rang. I did not answer it, or step near it. Yet, after seconds of ringing, a voice could be heard yelling from the other side. Harubu. Direkamazinka. Dirikamasenka. The man sounded as sane, maybe Chinese or Korean, and I welled my mouth shut as the man's choking screams filled the room. After 10 seconds of silence, I blurted out a faint, "What the fuck?" Apparently, this was audible. The man's voice erupted as he began to yell, his words interrupted by deep breaths of air that seemed impeded by something, as if there was something around his neck. Onegaishimasu. Ikugadekinai. Roppu ga kitsu sujiru. My knees began to feel weak, and I fell to the floor, the dark room around me beginning to feel oppressive. The phone sat in the faint fluorescent light, and I crawled slowly towards it with feeble arms. Do you, speak English? I got to my knees, clasping my hands around the phone, pressing tightly on the power button. The pleading from the other side did not stop. Kazokunai, mashuakarimasen. I don't understand you, I yelled. The man did not stop yelling, and I began to feel a panic take hold as I tried to force the phone off again. The phone would not shut off. Suddenly, the voice on the other side was replaced with another ringing, and I sat silently, as now an elderly woman could be heard whispering something from the other side. Is there someone there? She said. I clasped my fingers around the device as I locked my front door, looking out my window at the early morning darkness outside. It was empty, as is usual for this hour, but I scanned the skyline for any lights that may be on, any person that may be watching me from a distance, anyone that could possibly be out there, alive. What is going on? I asked hurriedly. What do you want? I could feel my heart shatter as the answer destroyed my paranoid delusions of the situation. I want you to tell my grandkids I love them. My whole body became weak, and I brought my arms towards my chest as I began to feel a tightness in my throat. She spoke again, this time her words tear-soaked. And tell them I miss them. I sat silently as the words replayed in my mind. I was no longer unsure of the situation. Whoever it was that was reaching me, they thoroughly believed what was happening to them was real. And now, so was I. The woman spoke again, calmly and confidently. Are you an angel? She was sincere. There was a warmth in her voice. She didn't sound like she was trying to confuse or trick me. I sat still in the middle of my room, thinking of something to say. I held my hand over my mouth as I pushed myself towards the couch, slumping against it weakly. With a million thoughts running around in my head, I sat staring out the window at the dark blank sky outside. The stars glittered light years apart from one another, their brightness just visible, but beyond reach from one another. Why can't you tell them yourself? Surprisingly, the woman gave a faint laugh. Well, I'm too far away now. The cancer one. She seemed content with her fate, and I could do very little, but listen as she recounted her last few months in the hospital, the last time she saw her family, and the moment she went somewhere else. I'm okay though, just a little lonely. John and Murph know I'm in a better place. But the voice petered out, and for the first time, I didn't want to be alone. I wanted the voice on the other side to stay with me. But what? I asked. Are you there? The woman sighed, her voice getting thinner and softer. Do you know when I go to heaven? I don't. I've been here a long time, and it's so dark. You're the first voice I've heard in years. Her voice trailed away as the connection began to dwindle. My brother is waiting for me up there, I'm sure of it. Wait, I said, gripping the phone. The fear I had felt prior was now overcome with grief. I wasn't entirely sure if what I was experiencing was real or not, but I was beginning to realize that the people on the other end completely and unequivocally believed what was happening to them was real. You never gave me your name, so I can tell your family. Silence. Hello. Hello. More silence. I could feel a small tear form in my eye. I brushed it aside as time slowed to a crawl. My computer screen blacked out, and it fell asleep as I curled on the floor. I had my palm over the phone as I anticipated the next call. It never rang again. The phone was completely lifeless, and I was alone again. As the sun came up, and the city below returned to life, I sat still, peering out of my window like it was a television screen of some fake reality. I spent the rest of the day a ghost. I inhabited the walls of my apartment and I never left. I made my living, lived in the faint light of a fluorescent cage, and continued with my business, doing my best to avoid the crippling anxiety that came with my earlier experience, and the forsakenness that was clouding my mind. There was a woman in the corner of the room, sobbing, her knees wrecked and her hair draped over her body. She was wearing a bloodied skirt, and it looked as if she was previously in a brutal attack. "Where's Samantha?" I whispered. I couldn't see her face, nor do I think I wanted to, but I could very easily hear her. As soon as I said her name, she tilted her head, before turning towards me. I gave a slight whimper, before covering my mouth, shrinking into the couch. "I thought I'd follow your voice," she said. Her sobs echoed throughout the small room, and the sounds of the world were drowned out by her despair. "But you're not here." She started walking towards the center of the room, and I began to shake violently as I could feel the room drop in temperature. My heart was erupting from its cage, and I placed my covers over my eyes as I pinched them tight. I expected her to attack me, maybe even kill me. I didn't know how I'd be able to fight back. I wasn't religious, so I didn't have that going for me. The most I could do is shrivel up and pray. She stopped walking. I peered with one eye over the cover. The figure was standing a mere foot away, but she wasn't looking at me. No, she wasn't looking at anything in particular. Her face was scanning the room, and she was wandering around, looking for something, or someone. I kept my eye trained on her as she turned towards the door, her sobs filling the room. Then, without prompt, she spoke again. "I thought you'd be here," she said. "I'm scared." That's when I understood. Everything was beginning to make sense. The terror I felt was monumental, but momentary. Hers was infinite. I no longer sat in fear. I mean, yes, I was still scared. But I didn't see her as an invader anymore. I only saw us as equals in this brief moment of time, unlikely companions. I said as calmly as my nerves would allow me. "I'm here with you." Her chin moved up, and I could see her pale skin and dry, dark eyes as for only a split second, a look of comfort washed over her bleak face as she turned to me. Yet, her gaze was past me, as if she was only following the voice. As I sat up straighter, she didn't change her look, only continuing to stare dead straight. She couldn't see me. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she said, tears draining down her face. "Please, stay." I hesitated, the cold air between us no longer piercing. I said the only thing I felt could help her in any way. I was not afraid of her. I'll always be here, I said. The apparition gave a faint smile as the shadows around her swallowed her. Thank you, it said, and in a moment I was alone in my apartment again. There was nobody but me, and the darkness, and the looming threat of the afterlife. As soon as she was gone, I bawled. I have no shame in admitting it. I cried for her, cried for myself, for the woman whose name will be lost in eternity. I was done living this life just to face an infinitum of separation. I couldn't help Samantha, but I wanted to. She depended on me, and I could not do more. Now, she is likely to never be heard from, or seen again, but she will live on, wondering if the world forgot about her. Maybe though, I could still help myself. However it happened, for what technical reason may abound, or for what divine intervention allowed it, I had talked to the other side. And it sounded no different than the life I had planted for myself. The afterlife was sealed in permanence. My current life wasn't, yet. All this time, I wanted to hide in the shadows, while the world ticked along. I wanted to try, and find comfort in the nest of loneliness I had fabricated. Most importantly, I wanted to find peace in the only way I thought possible, a life of solitude. But I was not at peace. Not yet. I woke up with tear-stained eyes in the morning, and immediately called my family. I told them I missed them, that I loved them. I promised I was moving back at the end of the month, that I would quit my soul-sucking job. I messaged my old friends from back home, promising them that I would get with them again. The knowledge I have now of the afterlife, it will always haunt me like a specter that lingers behind your shoulder. This infinite loneliness, it terrifies me, and I try my best not to think about it. I doubt I'll ever be the same again, because of my encounter. I can only hope that I will one day be lucky enough to hear a faint voice in the endlessness that would bring even a minute of comfort to me. After I submit this, I will be microwaving my phone again. I hope that it works. I hope that when I set it on the counter, it'll ring once more and that a voice will be heard on the other side. I hope I can give someone another chance of being remembered, another spirit a chance to share its voice. A voice that needs to hear mine.